Today on the Unofficial Shopify podcast, we're going to talk to a longtime Shopify partner whose contributions over the last decade got him recognized at the most recent Shopify event. I want to hear about his journey, challenges in app development, what being a Shopify partner means, because that's been my career for quite some time. And I want to share that experience with the rest of you. I'm your host, Kurt Elster.
Jack Nasty.
And this is the Unofficial Shopify podcast. Harshdeep Singh Hura, you are our guest today. Tell me, what do you do? How did you get here, sir?
It's only after 10 years of spending on the Shopify ecosystem and like watching you on the partners page almost every single day up until very recently. That's that. It took a while, but we are here finally. So to quickly introduce myself, I'm Harshdeep Singh Hura. I'm the founder at Hura Media again. I sold the agency back in 22 when we were a full works agency. I took a little bit of a detour, worked for this beautiful agency, a piece out of Edmonton. And now we're back onto building my own apps again. And this time I want to do public apps. So I started back in 2014. And funny thing is, in India, you were actually filling out forms and mailing them physically to Shopify India to pay for your subscriptions.
So 10 years ago, what inspired you to become a Shopify partner?
Someone actually approached me asking if I do websites, and they were like, so I can't find developers for this one platform called Shopify. Do you know about it? And I was like, yes, of course. Like, I've been searching for clients too. The reality was I started learning about Shopify after they had given me the advance on the retailer. And that's how it just started. I wanted to fund my iOS apps. The passion just grew because working with Shopify was fun. And, that time seeing it as there's this one tiny company based out of Toby's shed, and they're like 5 people building up an e-commerce platform to do what it is. So the entire journey started because I just wanted to fund my iOS apps to then selling the iOS app. And I was like, let's kind of do this full time. This is really fun. To then selling the agency in 22, and then now getting back into it with public apps. So it's been really fun, all these 10 years of being in here.
And so it sounds like your side hustle replaced what you wanted to be your main gig. These things got flipped. And Hura Media, that was custom app development?
Correct.
And was custom app all for Shopify stores?
Oh, yeah. So I first started out as a freelancer doing a lot of storefront stuff. I think the first 15, maybe even 20 apps were just like integration with local retail POS systems in managing inventory. And so it was fun. All the love was towards custom apps. So it usually ended up being, hey, you find a wishlist app that is too expensive, let us build out for you. And it's very tailored to you as a merchant and all of the specific features that you actually need with all the integrations that you really need. Which would be, at least back in that time, so I was like, you know what, let's just kind of focus all in on custom apps, to then eventually going internationally and like signing a lot of merchants from NA and EU, and weirdly a lot of merchants from Singapore. So pre-2018, I think 50% of all of my retailers were from Singapore and Malaysia. And I have no idea how that happened. So we would work with them, and like get things done. And even with them, it was like, hey, can you do these tiny changes on the storefront? Usually with the custom app dev related. But 90% of our work was, hey, let's build more and more apps.
What was selling that agency like?
Oh, God. Very honestly, a lot of people think like I got bored. Especially my friends here thought like, okay, you're done with the Shopify ecosystem. And I was very clear, like my day job's goal is to bring me revenue, not for emotional fulfillment, right? So I was like, I'm getting a great price, and it got acquired by someone in Singapore itself because we still had a lot of great folks from there. And it was genuinely just because the price was great. And the agency who then took over, we've been working with them for like a year or two at that point, and I knew all of them at a personal level. So I was like, you know what, makes sense for them to kind of take it on. But then I lost out on a lot of valuation because I was like, I want to keep the name because it has my surname in it. And uh, that ended up not being a very good idea business wise, but I was like, my surname's more important to me. And if I ever plan to come back again, which I'm doing right now, I need my surname and that exact same branding to be in there. Uh, so yeah, it was almost bittersweet because I was like lost out on so much revenue because I want to keep the name, but at the same time, I sold my agency. So it was a great uh, feeling, but at least that's what I remember it to be.
And you mentioned that you had people speculating on why you would make this sale. Is it frustrating to have a stranger tell you why you made a decision that you know why you made?
It's always weird, right? Because you don't know what's going on internally or in my head or in fact anywhere, right? Like think about us speculating what Shopify is going to announce tomorrow or what the current announcements are, like with GraphQL being the only way forward and REST being deprecated. We have the exact same thing, right? We're like, oh, why would you do that? REST is just fine. Uh, but I think that's just human nature at this point. It's like people are going to speculate. Like even today with so much visibility on me, I know a lot of people still speculate why I'm making a bunch of changes and they have a lot of assumptions on how I should live my life or how I should be communicating on Twitter. Like the base one being people expect me not to use cuss words on Twitter. And I'm like, I'm not gonna like take it too far, but that's who I am. And you can't really change that. So I would usually just attribute it to human nature and ignore it. But yeah, the talk with my parents, I had to kind of clarify why I want to keep the name. Uh, and I was like, it's going to suck to have someone else, be like, hey, that's Hura Media, but it's run by random people. And yeah, I was like, I'm not selling my name out there. I'm selling the company.
I I understand why you made the decisions you did. It'd be too weird.
Yeah.
It's like this: you have spun yourself off into a separate entity that you don't have control of. Not not ideal. A little strange.
Yeah.
No, I don't blame you or question that decision for a second. So in the having done this 10 years,
Mhm.
what it's like, what are some of the big changes you have noticed within the Shopify ecosystem?
Huh. Uh, I think now one of the biggest one is the push for enterprise. And back then, it was usually like, hey, you have to be a smaller or medium-sized business to be on Shopify. And enterprise, and even I think Plus was just out when I just joined. So I think one of the major and most amazing changes that I've seen over the last decade is Shopify hasn't shifted from SMBs to enterprise, but they have now stretched themselves from SMBs to enterprise. So in the sense that they're still catering to that core SMB and, that individual entrepreneur company people. Another great thing has been seeing Shopify go and this is like purely from an outsider's perspective, right? From a product mentality to a platform mentality. So what I mean by that is Shopify itself, if you think about it, we're usually thinking about the e-commerce CMS product, right? That you can just kind of set up and you have an online store and you have all of these channels like POS. Think about this. The network within the Shopify ecosystem has been so good in the recent years. Like you have a developer community and the app store. You have a theme developer community and the theme store. There's a experts community, which is now the Shopify partner community. If I were to then go back to 2014 and seeing it as the equivalent of what, say, a simple website builder is, to today having everything on there, I think it's one of the biggest shifts that most people don't realize it's happening. Because the baseline idea has been, oh, Shopify is just expanding. But what they have been quietly doing, from my perspective, is making the network so dense that you do not have to go outside of Shopify to get anything done.
It is, I mean, I agree with you entirely. The reason we joined, part of my attraction to it was we went, wow, their focus, their investment in partners, the community, and the ecosystem was obvious, over 10 years ago. And it has not changed. they have maintained that focus, and if anything, they've sharpened it, expanded it, improved it. And so, being a Shopify partner, really, well, I feel seen. I know you do, and having those resources available to us has always been quite beneficial. And so it lowers the barrier to entry, but mainly it really reduces the frustrations that we had felt with other platforms. I came from WordPress before Shopify, and we had experimented. I mean, we didn't just jump in on Shopify. We experimented with many e-commerce platforms, and hands down, it wasn't even close. We're like, this is the one. And we knew the importance of focus. I said, look, we're just going to do this, and let's see where this goes. But our background was web development, and so we went with that. And today we have a built for Shopify app, crowdfunder, and that built for Shopify thing, they take that seriously. There's a lot of revisions and effort that went into that. And so now that I have it and I had to go through, it's like hazing. I'm proud of it. You're gonna have to pry that from me. I love it. But go ahead.
So even with built for Shopify, it's getting even more stricter. If you read through the newer guidelines that are kicking in on 2025, you're gonna be like, okay, this is like, because right now it feels like every other app has it, because we spend a lot of time on Twitter, on LinkedIn. You can see every other day someone's like, hey, we just got the BFS patch, or someone crying about all of these revisions. But yeah, like when I read through the entire thing, in fact, just last night I was going through all of BFS stuff over and over again, because I was a little irritated on a few apps like, how did you get the BFS badge? I'm not even joking. And I wrote to someone at Shopify, I'm like, hey, listen, this is how I feel about it. And so I kind of went through all of the revisions and changes just last night, and I was looking through my notes, and I was like, okay, this is January 1st, they're going to like tighten up even more. And they have been on record on a lot of public forums saying like, we're continuously learning from all of it and making it even more stricter, which also brings you to the point that today's Shopify, like this version of Shopify that we have today, in my opinion, is the most accessible version of Shopify we have ever had. Right?
Why is that?
Like, so here's the thing. If you were to go back to 2019 when I just started on Twitter, so for me, the idea was, I'm going to pretend like I'm just learning Liquid and I'm just doing all of these things, and I'm going to like be like, hey, this is how easy it is. And I think a month or two in, I was just like, you know what, this is absolutely foolish, because I do not want to I don't want to pretend to be someone else. And I'd rather be like, hey, this is who I am. If you like it, that's great. If not, there's a bajillion other people to follow. Turns out like a lot of people noticed. And then compared to 2019 to today, I am like, if I cry about anything on Twitter, like, hey, this is broken, or you shouldn't have deprecated this, or XYZ things, I know for a fact within the next 48 hours, someone from Shopify is going to take notice and they're going to be like, hey, can we talk to you about it? Like, not a single time it has happened where, logically speaking, I have like not been like, oh, hey, you suck and all of these things. But I've been like, hey, so deprecating this or removing this actually had this impact. And this is not just me, like you're breaking all of these 20 other dependencies and you have to kind of handle this deprecation better, has always led to a quick conversation with someone from Shopify or whoever's related to that product. And they're like, hey, you know what? Here's a replacement. Let us help you out in kind of, navigating through the migration. Or, hey, here's another 3 months. While you migrate, we're still going to be supporting the older stuff. And this is what the new version is. So even when I got to meet a lot of senior leadership during editions and we were talking about it, that's what I brought up too. And I was like, the number one thing that I like about Shopify today is how accessible it is. As long as you're being civil and you're keeping emotion out of it. Because,
right.
Yeah, it's like, so now with me getting into public apps, if something breaks, I know 100 merchants are going to be mad at me and I'm going to have 1-star reviews. I can't have emotion come in between logic there, right? So I can't be screaming at a PM saying, oh, you are bad and you did this and that. But if I'm like, hey, so you did this led to this, and this is why I feel we should be fixing all of these things, that's a much better way to kind of go about it. So yeah, like this version of Shopify is the most accessible one we have ever had. to my memory.
I mean, it's absolutely right. If you raise a complaint and you have, and it's thoughtful, right? You can justify it and explain it. You will get a thoughtful answer. Absolutely. It's been, well, I mean, you got to be careful how you complain on Twitter, right? Do you want,
Right.
are you complaining to vent? That's not helpful. Or are you complaining to be constructive? And the constructive stuff it gets paid attention to. Like, you absolutely can get results that way. And that is kind of magical, isn't it? Like, when you think about the level of support offered to that partner community from a company of Shopify size, no one else is doing that.
Yeah.
I love my PlayStation. I enjoy Microsoft products. There are plenty of, I love Apple. If I complain about those things on Twitter, no one's gonna care. I'm not gonna get a DM from somebody offering to help me. It's not gonna happen. I would be surprised. So currently, your focus is apps, and you have open source boilerplates for apps used by 1,000 apps on the App Store. Tell me about
roughly.
it. Why do this?
So I actually thought of a very good answer for why open source, but just last week I came back from ShopQuest. So quick background for ShopQuest. It's a unofficial Shopify meetup in Bangalore. The last one happened in February, and then now it was just like the first week of October. And this time I think we had like 150, 200 partners coming in, including like agencies, freelancers, developers, great people. And a lot of people came up to me and were like, hey, we would have never understood app development if it wasn't for your boilerplates. And they're like, hey, or I just used like half of your boilerplates in all of your middlewares, and then I pushed it into mine. And the constant DMs that I get, like, hey, thank you so much for the boilerplates. We built an app on top of it. That's how I also keep a track of like how many apps are using it. And almost 1,000 apps equates to, I think, 7 or 8% of all of App Store today, which is insane if you think about it.
It's pretty wild.
It's like so right before Build Award, one of the developer advocates like called me up. They're like, hey, so how many apps do you think are using it? I'm like, roughly like 950 to 1,000. And they're like, so about 7 to 8% of the App Store. And I was like, if you put it that way, I mean, so
Yeah, it's like 1 in 10 to 1 in 20 use it.
So,
and then that's what you enabled. Think about the amount of man hours you saved.
Oh, yeah. It's on one end, I'm like, holy crap, like that's an insane number. And on the other, I'm like, why are people using my stuff? Right. And so just after I came back from ShopQuest and I was thinking about it again, I was like, why do I do open source? Like, I do not have a rhyme or reason. In fact, the reason why I actually open sourced my boilerplates was I was like, I can't keep this to myself, and I'm too irritated to be inviting people on Collaborator every single time they spin up a new app. I'm like, I'm just going to open source it. And if it gets 1 star, I'm happy, right? So the original idea was I need to help just one developer, and that one developer is Harshdeep Singh. And if others use it, that's great. If others don't use it, I'm not going to sit and cry about it. But then,
it's a really healthy mindset.
Yeah.
It is.
And so I think the one thing that I learned about open source from all of this is you cannot like create a new project and open source it. It has to be something that you're using personally that you open source. And that's one of the only reasons why since 2019, when I first started to today, the repos have an update every 2 weeks. Whether it is just package updates and basic housekeeping to actually bring in the latest and greatest stuff, like managed webhooks and API updates and everything else. And it's been fun that way, right? So every single time I think about why do open source, I'm just like, I have like this new answer every single time. But after ShopQuest, I've just decided that, I've completely accepted that I do not know why I do open source. I just love that it gets like, I get to indirectly help so many people launch new businesses. And that's super in line with like we all do Shopify, right? It's to make commerce better. And so if my boilerplates actually help make commerce better by powering like 7-8% of the entire app store, I've like I'm in line with the entire idea of being in Shopify. Right?
Ultimately, that approach and that open source framework got you recognized for Shopify Build Award for community contributions.
Right.
And that was a big deal. A lot of people,
Oh yeah.
you got pulled up on stage, you get this award. This thing weighs like 4 pounds.
Oh yeah. It's heavy.
That's not an exaggeration. I think it's literally 4 pounds.
It is heavy. It is heavier than the Merchant Awards. I think the Merchant Awards is like what, 2 pounds? It's almost double
chunky.
the weight. Yeah, it's double the weight. That's what I remember properly, because one of the merchants here has it, and we were kind of measuring it, and I was like, okay, this is like almost twice the weight. But theirs also was broken, and they did not want to post pictures of it, so I was like, whatever. But yeah, but like, here's the thing about community awards specifically, right? And this breaks a lot of people's heads every single time I tell them, including a few people from Shopify. My community build award is actually in my cupboard. It is not on display anywhere in my house. What I ended up
This
doing...
is true. Last time we talked, you showed me. You had to open the cabinet to go get it.
Yeah, it's like right here on this
Why are
cupboard.
you hiding it?
So here's the thing. I did not get the community award, the build award, because I built the greatest app or the greatest storefront, right? I got the community award because of the people that actually follow me, or the people who decided that, hey, you know what, Harshdeep, you are the guy who we're going to listen to and we're going to follow. Because there's a bajillion people out there telling you today, this is how you grow your Shopify store, or how to grow your Shopify app, or, here's a bunch of free stuff and here's YouTube content. What I have on display instead is, because we knew about it, like, I think almost 2.5 weeks before editions.dev. So I wrote a script that pulled everyone's usernames from Twitter and GitHub and like dumped it in a file. And right as they called my name, I hit the script, saved everyone's usernames. And when I came back home, I was like, got 3 frames, printed everyone's usernames out, and that is on display. Because that award by itself means nothing without the people that put me up there. And so you almost...
It's too humble. I'm not buying any of it. This is all an elaborate act. The moment you've got like a button under your desk, and that, I think the award pops out of the cabinet. It's got spotlights on it. There's a song. You have your own theme song about how great you are. It spins in a circle, and everyone who enters the room has to kiss the ring. That's if I'm going to speculate on your choices, that's what I'm going with. True or false? True. I knew it.
Wish. I wish that was possible. Honestly, like, I wish I could be like egoistic enough to do that. Like, I think highly of myself. Don't get me wrong there. Like,
okay,
I know
good,
I'm like really good at it. But at some point you have to like remind yourself that that award only happened because of the people.
It's true.
Right?
Yeah, we're part of something greater here. And that's kind of cool, isn't it?
Yeah, and like, think about this. That's why we stay in the ecosystem, right? Because I've done Salesforce, I've done Magento, I've done WooCommerce, right? And I've been around in the ecosystem for a good while. Nothing compares to the community that we have built up here. And so for me to get an award specifically for community contributions and to be like, oh no, you know what? Screw the people. Here's my award on display, doesn't make sense. The other alternative that my parents suggested was to also have the award right in front of the frames, so that you kind of have this, like, hey, this is the award. We negotiated on not doing that because I was like, this is my award and I get to decide how I want to display it. But yeah, every now and then I would pull out the award, just sit down and be like, this actually happened. Because it's still unreal that I flew down to Toronto when I wasn't even attending editions, by the way. And this happened, so I was like, you know what, I have to fly down now. Flew down, had an amazing week, met a bunch of great people. I missed you sadly there. And I was like, okay, I need to catch up with you somehow. And now we're doing this. And yeah, like, even today, like randomly, I would just sit down, like at the end of the day, and I'm just like, the Build Awards actually happened. Like, and I think more importantly, when my name was announced and the amount of people cheering has me tear up every single time. Like, I don't think I can do justice with any combination of words to put down the feeling of like those are complete strangers who I'd never known if it wasn't for Shopify, showing that I get recognized for my community contributions.
It is
Right?
it's
It's insane.
it is cool. I'm shocked at how humble you are.
Highly debatable, but okay, we're gonna run with that.
I've had people tell me that tell me I'm humble, and I've heard people unknowingly describe me that way, not knowing that it would get back to me. And I tell my wife that it drives her insane. She's like, "You are not humble. What? Who are they talking about?" And so I'm so humble. I'm just like the humblest person you ever met.
My mother would say the same. She's just like, you have a lot of superiority complex. And my usual response to her has been from day one that it's not a complex when you are actually better than everyone else. And so she would randomly take screenshots on Twitter of people saying, be like, King, thank you so much for XYZ and all of this stuff. And she would like send me a screenshot, be like, superiority complex. And I have to like be like, hey, mom, I'm actually that good. So it's not a complex anymore.
Yeah, it's not a complex if strangers on the internet are thanking you.
Yeah, I'm just like
I think at this point it's reality. So
yeah.
When we talk about the Shopify developer community, partner community ecosystem, it occurs across many surfaces, right? I could find it on Twitter. I could find it like I engage on Twitter. That's what I like. And you were just at a conference, and there's so many ways to engage with the partner community. What is your preferred flavor of Shopify developer ecosystem? How do you access it?
I think Twitter has been my home ground for a good while, but now they're rate limiting me, thinking I'm a bot. So that's a little frustrating and alarming.
You're rate limited? You're tweeting too much?
Yeah. Like I make a post, it's deleted, and I have to kind of go back and post it again. This has happened multiple times over the last 3 months, and I'm on the highest paid tier. And I was like, maybe that should help. It doesn't help. And I've written to support too, which is a little concerning. So I'm just like, okay, I need to diversify and really get into LinkedIn and a little bit of Facebook too. Because
LinkedIn's real active. Facebook's okay. I think the algorithm on Facebook has changed in a way where it's prioritizing, portrait video as opposed to anything else. Because I manage 2 Facebook groups with collectively like 15,000 people, and I just don't see the community aspect of Facebook being a priority for Meta right now. At least that's how it's felt. Twitter for sure, but it's so weird. Threads is interesting. I have an account. I'm not active. And LinkedIn for sure. LinkedIn, I'm consistently surprised by how engaged people are.
Yeah, but then LinkedIn still feels very fabricated because people are either trying to partner up, offer a job, or get a job.
It is very different.
Yeah, it's like, because the one thing that I really love about Twitter is its actual genuine interactions. And all the spam DMs are, hey, here's my office hours at like $1 bajillion an hour. If you, sign on, thank you so much for the money, and I'm willing to now listen to you. If not, like, thank you so much for ignoring me now. So that's great. But yeah, like I would say like 95% of interactions on Twitter are actually genuine, which is the only reason why I'm still there.
Someone told me Twitter is the sweatpants of social media, and that has stuck with me. And I'm like, I don't overthink posting on Twitter the same way I might send a newsletter. And there is a freedom to the lazy authenticity of X, formerly Twitter, right? It'll always be Twitter in our hearts. Sorry, Elon. I don't know. It's a fun place. It's low key, low effort. If you haven't tried it, it's kind of fun. So what are you working on now? You're building a new app?
Yeah. So I'm building YAKK. So the entire idea with YAKK has been, I want to make bulk gifting more accessible, but also stop you from being lazy by just bulk gifting gift cards. Like, hey, here's a bunch of money, just go buy it. Right? It needs to be a little more thoughtful. So a lot of my merchants asked for something similar, and I was like, you know what? This problem is difficult enough that I want to wake up every single day and work towards it. So, like, think about it. When as a merchant, you think about bulk gifting. The numbers that come in your head are like 50, 100, 1,000 people, right? What if bulk gifting was just 5 people and it's 5 of your friends and you want to buy socks for them, right? We don't think about it that way, right? Because the bigger the number, the bigger the, revenue and bigger the dopamine hit. But like, what if you're losing out on a lot of sales because I either have to buy those 5 pairs of socks to my place and then ship it out, or do 5 checkouts? So a very simple thing is, if you could check out for 5 people at once, what would bulk gifting look like? And that's when YAKK came in, and I was like, you know what, this is actually a problem that I actually want to solve. Like, it's been, like 3-4 months now that I've been like working with a few merchants, kind of in early access. I just submitted the app today for proper listing. And that's what we're seeing, right? More and more people are like, hey, you know what? Let me buy for 3 people. Let me buy for 6 people. Let me buy for 10 people. And that's just been fun, right? Because now when I sit down with these 11 merchants and I'm like, hey, so how's bulk gifting going? And they're like, the perspective shift on what they think was bulk gifting versus what it is today is like, it's just insane to see that a simple app, well, it's not so simple, honestly, can have that big of an impact on how they perceive what a bulk sale is from a consumer perspective instead from a huge B2B perspective.
I want to know, you just submitted this app for the approval process.
Right.
You've had other apps. Given that experience, you are uniquely in the position to tell me what's the biggest misconception you see new Shopify app developers having about developing Shopify, or just being in the Shopify ecosystem. What's the big misconception for the newbies?
A lot of people think it's an engineering game. Like, you think you come in with all of these engineering skills of like 500 years of combined experience, and you're using Rust with AWS, or you're hosting with bare metal. Simply put, the App Store is a distribution problem, not an engineering problem. Right? Because think about this. Shopify does the heavy lifting of all of the business logic. I do not have to sit down and be like, hey, you know what? If I'm creating an order, go ahead and reduce it from the inventory and do this or do that. Shopify is just like, hey, just tell me what you want to do. I'll handle all of the business logic, right? So any app that you build is just a bunch of UI and string-gated API calls. That's what an app is. Like, it's not super complicated. A lot of people think it's super complicated. It's not. Like, it's very rare that you're writing your own business logic. I came in with that on YAKK, and I was like, I have to write my own business logic for order splitting. And that is when I got reminded of this exact pain point that I keep telling other people. It's very rare that you do write a business logic, but 90% of your app is not an engineering problem, it's a distribution problem. Because what ends up happening is you could have the perfectly engineered wishlist app or pre-order app or invoicing app in the App Store. But if people do not know about it, and if it doesn't actually solve a problem that merchants have, it's as good as being completely useless. Like, that's just wasted engineering effort. So I really love developers who are like, hey, you know what? I have these 5 merchants who want this problem, and their problems are like 90% on an overlap, and there's a few niche use cases. I'm going to build an app, have them test it out, and then I'm going to push it out in the App Store. Those are the kind of apps that actually work really well, because they're actually solving a real problem, and they are not concerned about engineering the solution, but about distributing the solution.
If I were to ask you what your one piece of advice for an aspiring Shopify app developer or entrepreneur, someone joining our community, what would it be?
I would still stick to this. Like, it's not complicated. It's like, if you're coming in, let's say, from a Salesforce background, because I did Salesforce for a good while to help my cousin out, and you kind of come in and you're like, hey, I want to build apps, you're wrong. Start with the storefronts first. Because think about it this way. Today you run a full service agency. I have run a full service agency. When we come up with a problem, or like, we're like, hey, you know what, we have to build an app this quarter. What do you think we're doing? Are we pulling solutions out of thin air, or are we like, hey, pick up all of the support tickets from the last 6 months, see what a recurring problem is, and then list out 10 apps and be like, what problem do we want to solve? So anyone who's just entering the Shopify ecosystem and is like, hey, I want to be an app developer, I'm like, for the first 2 years, you're working on storefronts with merchants. So you do storefronts, you understand how, or like what the actual concerns of a merchants are, you understand point and click tools, then you kind of go over to flow, and then you come over to custom apps and then public apps. So this flow actually helps you understand Shopify properly. You're not replicating what Shopify already offers, and you have a better understanding of the entire platform. So anything now that you build is plugging into their actual workflow, like the merchant's actual workflow, right? So if you're coming from the outside, launch storefronts, work with merchants, and I'm like, if you do this for 2 years, you're going to have an understanding to why I'm like saying all of this. But then people don't have the patience for 24 months of like unrelated work when they want to build apps. And then on my community Discord, I have literally like 10 people asking about the exact same thing. And I'm like, I literally said, go work with a merchant. And I was like, you know what? Work with 2 merchants and let's come back in 3 months and let's talk about it. The 2 people who took me seriously, they're like, Harshdeep, you were right. And I'm like, spent a decade doing this. Of course I'm right on this. So yeah, like the entire baseline would be work with merchants on storefronts and see what they expect out of the platform and from like partners, and then kind of go ahead and build apps.
It's great advice because, like, think about the hubris of I'm going to put in the effort to build an app for an ecosystem in which I don't have experience with the end user. Not a great approach, right? You're setting yourself up for trouble. Versus like learn and work with the people that you are trying to help. It seems like sane advice to me. So, are there any trends that you anticipate coming up? You know, where 2025 is right around the corner, and you're building an app, and I didn't hear the word AI once here, right? Like, it. What? So, what trends do you think are going to shape the future of Shopify app development?
With the stretch to enterprise, it's not the proper B2B apps, and it's not the proper small and medium-sized business apps, but it's the businesses that are too large to be called a medium business, but are too small to be called an enterprise. That space, right? Like, think about it this way. You're making a lot of money or like a lot of revenue that you are not fit for the advanced plan. Like, you need more, but you're not making enough to justify being on plus, right?
Yeah, it's a big jump when you go advanced to plus.
Now think about this. If you were to look at plus, like one of the things that usually come up is B2B. How can you bring that B2B experience, not in the proper plus way, do not exceed it, but like as a bridge to plus app, right? So people come in and they're like, hey, I need plus and I cannot justify spending $2,300, $2,500 a month for it. But I'd rather spend like another $500 a month, maybe, on the B2B app that gets me there. And so then when I see enough traction coming in, I'm like, you know what, let's go all in on Shopify and native features, and let's jump over to B2B, right, with Plus. So any app that is your bridge to Plus is something that's really great. Either that or I wouldn't call it a trend, but like the baseline of just build what merchants ask you to build. It's not that complicated, but the most complicated part is like finding merchants who would give you ideas, which again, like I said, people don't want to do for some reason. And as far as AI is concerned, like AI is worth more than just being built chatbots out of, or like for code generation. Like think about this. This is what YAKK does. And I talked about it at ShopQuest. For every category of merchant, I have a completely new set of screens. So you as a F&B merchant selling cookies on the internet would have a totally different experience on YAKK versus someone who's selling socks on the internet. And you'd be like, why is that a thing, right? What's happening here is, one, while we are trying to set up bulk gifting, the way you want to set up is very different because one UI cannot potentially solve problems for every niche that's available, right? So while for the first 6 to 8 months, all users are going to have the exact same experience. What's going to be happening is, since we're tracking a bunch of usage data and we know what category a store belongs to by pulling out like, say, 20, 30, 40 of their products, we can start categorizing users and be like, hey, you know what? This user who is doing F&B has the same usage pattern as 20 other people in F&B. So you know what? Let's build a screen out, or let's assign them a set of workflows that works for them. So what you're almost immediately doing is you're taking up all of that usage data, running it locally to Llama 3, like that's what I really like now, and having that spit out an array, be like, hey, you know what? For product groups, use screen 2. For orders, use screen 3. For the F&B category. And so then when you sign up to YAKK tomorrow, and we are like, hey, you know what? This is an F&B store. Let's actually serve you those specific screens. And then you're like, hey, you know what? I don't like this experience, or this is there, or that is there. We can always swap those out. So when you're using AI, it's not just about, hey, let's build a chatbot or an autoresponder, or hey, here's image generation out of it. You could do something that is like in the background, and it changes the way your merchant actually uses the app. And now think about this. One UI cannot solve every problems, right? But if you have 6 different UI sets specific to certain categories of apps, you're now solving more problems, right? And since a lot of the business logic is taken care of by Shopify, this becomes your USP. This is something that no one else can copy. Another fun thing that happens is, I know a bunch of developers who are going to try to copy a bunch of UI elements, and these are, God, I don't want to call them out, but they're repeat offenders, right? We've all seen them on Twitter.
Yeah, you'll see it.
Yeah.
They see a successful app in the Shopify App Store, and then they clone it. Like they make the same thing, and then it tweak a handful of things, but like just slavishly recreate it.
Yeah, and so the fun thing that I came up with was, because a lot of these are detectable with their emails or with the names and all of that stuff, and if they are on the dev store, I replace all of the UI and just spit out clown emojis until their browser crashes. And I'm like, see, now that's fun, right? Like a bunch of clown emojis with like the clown circus music playing in the background, and then your browser crashes. Like, imagine you're just like, you know what? This is a successful app. I'm going to copy it. You install it on a dev store, and clown emojis everywhere. So it's also necessary to have a bunch of fun. And I'm just hoping someone takes a screenshot of this, sends me a DM, and be like, dude, well played.
It's quite the Easter egg you worked out. But that's very clever. I never thought about it. So what you're proposing here is, as part of the onboarding or the app installation, you figure out what kind of store it is, and you're not asking the person to pick a category. You're doing it based off the product catalog, and then assigning them a category that changes the admin, the interface of your app, to be more relevant to them.
Yeah.
And then if it's, and then we have some if then else in there where it's like, all right, well, if the email address for the merchant email is at badperson.com or whatever, then we do our clown emoji Easter egg.
Right.
That's funny. That's really good. That's very clever. I'm starting to think you're going places here.
Hopefully, because like one build award's great, but there's like 3 categories and I only have one. So yeah, the app and storefront one is still pending.
Going for the trifecta, get all 3. We need a good name for that. Like if you've got an Emmy, an Oscar, a Tony, you can get an EGOT and a Grammy, an EGOT award, right? We need what's the acronym for the Shopify Build Awards? If you can get all 3, it's like community. What's the community? What's the other apps and themes?
Community, apps, and storefronts.
All right. Well, that shortens to CAS, so we got to work with that. Yeah, I got a CAS award. It's okay. I think we could do better.
Yeah. That's what, we should actually leave it to people on Twitter and LinkedIn to really come up with an acronym. But before that, we need to have someone to actually win all of those and then be like, hey guys, I need a new name. Hopefully it's me. But yeah, this is something that's difficult enough, because at this point, once you've been building 300-400 apps over the last 10 years, it just becomes boring after a certain while. It's like a regular chore, right? Because you have all of the boilerplates. Then you have built your own Polaris like component library that you just copy paste it in. And so like you then hit a point where you're just like, you know what? I need something more difficult to kind of wake up to. This thing's difficult enough. Because for me to win my second, it's more harder than for anyone else to win their first. And so I'm like, okay, that is something that I want to work towards. And I think you would have seen a few videos on YAKK where I kind of show how quick the page transition is between two pages.
I saw that this morning, actually.
Right? And I was like, people are just losing their head over it. Be like, okay, listen, even with demo data, we can't actually do that. And how are you doing that with actual user data? Because the video starts off with like me actually filling up all of the information and then kind of spinning around. And that's breaking a lot of developers' heads. And I was like, when I tell you that I'm coming for the second Wind Award, it's not a funny thing that I'm saying to garner likes. I'm like, I'm actually focused on getting there.
Oh, I believe you. I did not question it for a second.
Oh, thank you.
So we're coming to the end of our time together. I want to know, where can I learn more about you? Where should people go?
So you can always head over to harshdeephura.com. That's like my baseline, or my website, like that's my personal site. And also, by the way, before we close up on this, if you head over to harshdeephura.com, you're going to see how closely it is to Paul's website, his personal site. Because here's the thing.
It's all text?
And even though this is the code base that I've been using since 2004, when I first learned HTML, this was back in like 4th grade, there was a tiny amount of time where I was like, you know what, let's actually like add some pizzazz to it. And around that time is when I saw Paul and you talking on the Unofficial Shopify podcast. And I was like, you know what, let's actually check their sites. I opened up Paul's first for some reason. And I was like, if he does that, like, I think I'm completely fine doing this. And yeah, like even this very specific moment, right, where we hopped on the call and we were like, okay, you know what, let's get started. It's a huge full circle moment from me, because I remember reading your blog post on how you got started with the partner ecosystem, to like watching you on the partners page, to then watching you and Paul go back and forth with podcasts, like PFCM stuff, to like now this happening. And I'm like, the child in me is extremely happy that he gets to do this. So more than anything else, thank you so much for being that source of inspiration to kind of actually help me get till here, because I would have quit a long time ago.
That's amazing. I have goosebumps. You have made my morning. Like I had no idea. That's fabulous.
It's great. I think even when talking to Kelly Vaughn, who's also been like one of those people who I always look up to, it was like when we were talking, she was like, I didn't realize how many people it indirectly actually helped. And that's also what's happening with me now. Like at Shoppers, people coming up and be like, dude, like without you, I would have never gotten into the Shopify ecosystem. And I'm like, I feel what you're feeling right now. Right? Like that moment of goosebumps, like I was just doing my stuff, right? And you just now come and tell me that you saw me out of nowhere and I am the reason why you're here. So like, as someone who's been on both the sides, like I can really assure you, you being one of those people, especially who I also get to see every single time I open up the partners page, was like, okay, wait.
And that stupid camo blazer. Story.
It was great. Come on.
You know, that was peacocking. It worked. I still have it. It's polyester. Okay. It's horrible. It doesn't breathe.
No, but like when they removed all of your pictures from there, I was like, there's no point of going on there anymore. The soul's gone. So I just directly log into my partner account now. The bookmarks have changed, but yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for being part of great 10 years already.
Thank you. Yeah. Wow. What a great way to wrap this up. Harshdeep Singh Hura, thank you. And absolutely, when YAKK is available, I got to check it out.
For sure. Huh? Okay.